Texas, a prehistoric hunter once took shelter in a cave. The person built a fire and went through their hunting tools, leaving behind the ones that had broken. Then they left.
Long before pyramids rose in Egypt, a hunter walked into a Texas cave, left something behind, and vanished. Buried for over 6,000 years, this ancient toolkit reveals secrets about how early Americans hunted and survived. Join us as we explore this once-in-a-lifetime discovery. The discovery: around 6,500 to 7,000 years ago, an indigenous hunter made his way into a cave located on what is now a private ranch between Alpine and Marfa. He brought along a hunting kit that included essential weapons for surviving in the tough environment. Recently, archaeologists found this kit, which has various artifacts, including parts of a hunting projectile system, a straight-flying boomerang, a leather pouch, and a single sandal that is roughly a modern size 12. They also discovered remnants of a small fire, the tanned hide of a pronghorn antelope with hair still attached, and nearby, a small pile of human feces. The cave's ceiling collapsed a long time ago and has been filled with dirt blown by the wind over the centuries. This means that the spot where the weapons cache was located is more like a carefully excavated archaeological site rather than a scene from an Indiana Jones movie. Even though none of the hunting equipment is complete, what was uncovered is surprisingly well preserved, making it possibly the oldest intact weapons collection ever found in North America. And it's incredibly valuable too. Archaeologist Chris Hoard from the Odyssey Archaeological Research Fund is seen at the cave's entrance. The artifacts discovered are thought to be the oldest intact weapons collection ever found in North America. This cave is situated around 40 miles northwest of the Mexican border, and looters have been digging through the site for years. However, these archaeologists tried to think like prehistoric humans. They squeezed between rocks to explore further into the cave. Brian Schroeder, who is the director of the Center for Big Bend Studies at Sul Ross State University, said that they quickly discovered that it was really deep in that section of the site. And the reason they were out there was to find really old artifacts, so they kept going deeper. Chris Morgan, a professor of anthropology and archaeology at the University of Nevada, Reno, called the discovery groundbreaking, stating that it indicates that they were very well equipped with advanced technology, and it demonstrated that they were planning ahead. The find left archaeologists stunned. They came across a hunting shelter and repair shop where hunters would spend a night or two. These skilled warriors managed to avoid the dangers of the past and the looters of the future. An ancient hunting toolkit, discovered in fragments, revealed to researchers how these hard-working prehistoric humans utilized the cave and how organized their hunting tactics were. Dr. Schroeder and his team started digging at the San Esteban rock shelter, aiming to find the oldest signs of humans in North America. They were surprised to uncover what seemed to be the first rest stop for prehistoric hunters. They found a remarkable and unique assortment of weapons, including an atlatl. This ancient spear thrower, noted as the oldest directly dated specimen in North America, showed striking resemblances to others from the larger Texas Big Bend region, according to a paper from 2023. After looking at a boomerang, archaeologists think they sharpened the long wooden tips to make it even more lethal. Moreover, they discovered other artifacts like wood and stone-tipped darts, and a folded antelope hide that was likely used to make a bag or clothing, as reported in a New York Times article on the Center for Big Bend Studies website. Unusually, while archaeologists usually only find stone tools at these cave sites, these ancient hunters left behind well-preserved wood, sinew, and feathers. Devin Pettigrew, a project researcher and ancient weaponry expert at Sul Ross State University, explained the distance that hunter-gatherers likely traveled to find shelter here during the hunting season. They probably set up camp to sort and fix their tools, almost like they were taking an inventory, and even got rid of unusable broken stuff. Archaeologists will study the human feces along with the weapons to learn about their diets and DNA once they receive approval from the local indigenous groups. They intend to publish their findings, but there is no set date for that. The discovery shows that stone tools are just one part of these much more intricate tool collections. These discoveries weren't just random, they belong to a time of great change and adaptation, a period we now call the Archaic Age. Let's find out why this era matters. The Archaic Age. In the study of North American archaeological cultures, the Archaic period is recognized as lasting from about 8,000 to 1,000 BC, according to the timeline of pre-Columbian cultural stages in North America. This period is marked by the Archaic stage of cultural growth. The Archaic stage is noted for its subsistence economies, which relied heavily on the gathering of nuts, seeds, and shellfish. The end of this period is linked to the shift towards settled farming, and the exact date can differ widely throughout the Americas. Since the 1990s, the accurate dating of several Middle Archaic sites in northern Louisiana, Mississippi, and Florida has put traditional development models to the test. In these regions, hunter-gatherer groups in the lower Mississippi Valley began constructing large earthwork mound complexes as early as 3,500 BC, as evidenced by Watson Brake, with construction continuing for about 500 years. Notable early mound sites from this era include Frenchman's Bend and Hedgepath, all built by local communities. Watson Brake is now recognized as the oldest mound complex in the Americas, predating the one at Poverty Point by nearly 2,000 years, with both located in northern Louisiana. Over 100 sites have been linked to the Poverty Point culture of the late Archaic period, which was part of a broader trading network throughout the Southeast. In the southeastern woodlands, beginning around 4000 BC, people took advantage of wetland resources, leading to the creation of large shell middens. These middens formed where communities settled along the rivers, but there is little evidence of archaic peoples living along the coast before 3000 BC. Some coastal archaic sites might have been submerged due to rising sea levels, with one site off St. Lucie County, Florida, found 15 to 20 feet underwater and dated to 2,800 BC. Between 3000 BC and 1000 BC, shell rings, large shell middens that generally encircle open areas, were established along the coast. These shell rings are quite common in South Carolina and Georgia, but they can also be found scattered across the Florida Peninsula and along the Gulf of Mexico coast, reaching as far west as the Pearl River. In certain locations like Hoars Island in southwest Florida, the abundance of resources allowed for the development of sizable mound-building communities that thrived year-round. 4 shell or sand mounds on Hoars Island have been dated between 2,900 and 2,300 BC. Native Americans in the northern Great Lakes region crafted copper tools, ornaments, and utensils that were traded across the Great Plains and Ohio Valley. The presence of shell ornaments and copper artifacts at Indian Knoll in Kentucky indicates a vast trade network that lasted for thousands of years. The Shield Archaic represents a unique regional tradition that emerged during a warm climatic period starting around 6,500 years ago. During this time, forests expanded northward, and temperatures were higher than those recorded in the late 20th century. This tradition is linked to the northern frontier and the transitional zone between boreal forest and tundra, located in what is now northern Saskatchewan and the Northwest Territories near Lake Athabasca. The Late Shield Archaic phase, which lasted from 3,500 to 4,450 years before present, includes sites that reach all the way to Manitoba, and archaeologists have looked into possible Shield Archaic sites as distant as Killarney Provincial Park near Georgian Bay in Ontario. In 1976, the well-known Canadian archaeologist J.V. Wright suggested that the Shield archaic developed from the Northern Plano tradition. But this idea was challenged by Brian C. Gordon in a publication from 1996. The tools from the Shield archaic period showed different designs depending on whether they were found in. Tools like these didn't exist in isolation. They were part of a larger way of life, one built around hunting, gathering, and moving with the seasons. Let's explore the world of hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers. Hunting and gathering was the first and most lasting way humans adapted to the natural world, making up at least 90% of history. After agriculture was invented, hunter-gatherers who didn't adapt were often pushed out or taken over by farming or herding groups in many regions. In Western Eurasia, it wasn't until around 4000 BC that farming and metalworking societies completely took over hunter-gatherers. These advanced societies spread more quickly in areas with fewer forests, forcing hunter-gatherers into thicker woodlands. Only during the Middle to Late Bronze Age and Iron Age were societies able to fully replace hunter-gatherers in their last stronghold in the densest forests. Unlike the Bronze and Iron Age societies, Neolithic groups struggled to settle in thick forests, and Copper Age societies had only limited success. A study found that women participate in hunting in 79% of modern hunter-gatherer societies. However, when this study was checked, it showed that several methodological issues skewed their results in the same way. Their findings do not go against the large amount of evidence showing gender roles in foraging societies. Today, only a few uncontacted groups are still considered hunter-gatherers, and many of them also engage in gardening or herding to support their foraging activities. Traditionally, it was believed that women were primarily responsible for gathering, while men focused on hunting large game. However, recent studies have called this assumption into question. In many hunter-gatherer societies, women also hunted small game and, in some instances, even took part in hunting larger animals. A notable example is Megan Beasel's research on the Southern African Juhwan, titled Women Like Meat. A study from 2006 indicates that the division of labor by gender was a key organizational advancement that helped Homo sapiens surpass Neanderthals, enabling our ancestors to leave Africa and populate the world. A study from 1986 revealed that most hunter-gatherer societies have a division of labor based on gender that is symbolically structured. Nonetheless, there are a few instances where women hunted the same types of animals as men, sometimes even alongside them. For example, among the Juhwansi people in Namibia, women assist men in tracking down game. In Australia, the Martu people see both men and women involved in hunting, but they do it differently based on gender roles. Men tend to take greater risks to hunt larger animals like kangaroos for political reasons, which is seen as a form of competitive magnanimity, while women focus on smaller prey like lizards to feed their kids and build relationships with other women, aiming for a steady food supply. In 2018, archaeologists found the remains of a female hunter who lived 9,000 years ago, along with tools for hunting and processing animals, at the Andean site of Willamayapacha in the Puna district of Peru. A 2020 study that was inspired by this find discovered that out of 27 burials of known genders among hunter-gatherers who were buried with hunting tools, 11 were female and 16 were male. Given the uncertainties, these results imply that between 30 to 50% of big game hunters could have been women. A study from 2023 examined research on modern hunter-gatherer societies dating from the 1800s to today and discovered that women participated in hunting in 79% of these societies. However, when this study was verified, it was found that multiple methodological failures all bias their results in the same direction. Their analysis does not contradict the wide body of empirical evidence for gendered divisions of labor in foraging societies. During the 1966 Man the Hunter Conference, anthropologists Richard Borshay-Lee and Irvin DeVore proposed that egalitarianism was a key feature of nomadic hunting and gathering societies, as their mobility necessitated minimizing material possessions across the group. This means that no single individual could hoard resources. Lee and DeVore also mentioned that these societies experienced changes in territorial boundaries and demographic makeup. At the same conference, Marshall Salins delivered a paper titled Notes on the Original Affluent Society, where he disputed the common belief that hunter-gatherers lived lives that were solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. A description by Thomas Hobbes in 1651, Salins argued that ethnographic evidence showed hunter-gatherers worked significantly fewer hours and had more leisure time compared to people in industrial societies while still having a good diet. Their affluence stemmed from their contentment with minimal material possessions. Later, in 1996, Ross Sackett conducted two separate meta-analyses to empirically evaluate Salins' perspective. The first study reviewed 102 time allocation studies, while the second examined 207 energy expenditure studies. Sackett discovered that adults in foraging and horticultural societies typically work around 6.5 hours a day, in contrast to the 8 hours a day worked by individuals in agricultural and industrial societies. Sahalin's theory has faced criticism for only considering the time spent on hunting and gathering, while neglecting the time used for collecting firewood, preparing food, and other activities. Additionally, other researchers claim that hunter-gatherer societies were not truly affluent, as they experienced very high rates of infant mortality, frequent illnesses, and ongoing conflicts. Researchers Gervin and Kaplan have found that about 57% of hunter-gatherers live to see the age of 15. The mutual exchange and sharing of resources, such as meat obtained from hunting, play a crucial role in the economic systems of hunter-gatherer societies. Thus, these societies can be characterized as operating on a gift economy. Archaeologists, a paper published in 2010, suggested that although hunter-gatherers might have lower levels of inequality compared to modern industrial societies, it doesn't imply that inequality is absent. The researchers estimated that the average Gini coefficient among hunter-gatherers was 0.25, which is similar to Denmark's in 2007. Moreover, the passing down of wealth through generations was also seen among hunter-gatherers. This indicates that wealthy hunter-gatherers, in relation to their communities, were more likely to have children who were as wealthy as they were, compared to the poorer members of their community. In fact, hunter-gatherer societies show an awareness of social stratification. Therefore, while researchers agreed that hunter-gatherers were more equal than modern societies, earlier descriptions of them living in a state of egalitarian, primitive communism were not accurate and could be misleading. On the other hand, this study only looked at modern hunter-gatherer communities, which limits our understanding of the actual social structures that were present before the Neolithic Revolution. Alain Testart and others have pointed out that anthropologists need to be cautious when applying findings from current hunter-gatherer societies to understand the structure of societies during the Paleolithic era, highlighting the cross-cultural influences, progress, and changes that these societies have experienced over the last 10,000 years. Hunter-gatherers may be long gone, but the ground still holds their story. Let's explore the archaeological evidence that brings their world back to life. Archaeological evidence. Hunting and gathering was likely the way human societies survived, starting around 1.8 million years ago with Homo erectus, and later with Homo sapiens. About 200,000 years ago, prehistoric hunter-gatherers formed groups made up of several families usually totaling a few dozen individuals. This method of living was the only way people sustained themselves until the end of the Mesolithic period, which was about 10,000 years ago, after which it slowly transitioned with the onset of the Neolithic Revolution. Evidence indicates that big-game hunter-gatherers migrated from Asia, Eurasia, to North America via a land bridge known as Beringia, which was present between 47,000 and 14,000 years ago. Approximately 18,500 to 15,500 years ago, these hunter-gatherers are thought to have tracked herds of now-extinct Pleistocene megafauna along ice-free pathways that connected the Laurentide and Cordilleran ice sheets. Another suggested route is that they traveled either on foot or in primitive boats down the Pacific coast to reach South America. Hunter-gatherers eventually thrived throughout the Americas, mainly in the Great Plains of the United States and Canada, with some groups extending as far east as the Gaspa Peninsula on the Atlantic coast and as far south as Monteverde in Chile. American hunter-gatherers occupied a vast geographical area, leading to different lifestyles among the various groups. Nevertheless, all these groups shared a similar method of producing stone tools, which allowed for the identification of distinct knapping styles and advancements. These early Paleo-Indian period tool adaptations have been discovered across the Americas, used by highly mobile bands consisting of about 25 to 50 members from extended families. During the Archaic period in the Americas, the environment changed, becoming warmer and drier while the last megafauna disappeared. Most population groups at this time remained highly mobile hunter-gatherers. However, individual groups began to concentrate on locally available resources, leading archaeologists to recognize a trend of increasing regional generalization, as observed in the Southwest, Arctic, Poverty Point, Dalton, and Plano traditions. These regional adaptations became standard, with a shift away from solely hunting and gathering towards a mixed economy that included small game, fish, seasonal wild vegetables, and cultivated plant foods. Researchers like Kat Anderson argue that the label hunter-gatherer oversimplifies things because it suggests that Native Americans never settled in one area long enough to make an impact on their surroundings. In reality, many of the landscapes we see in the Americas today are a result of how the indigenous peoples managed the land. Anderson focuses on the native Californians and the methods they used to cultivate their environment. These methods included activities like pruning, weeding, sowing, burning, and selective harvesting. Such practices enabled them to sustainably utilize the resources around them for centuries. California Indians have a negative perspective on the concept of wilderness. They think of wilderness as a sign that humans have lost their understanding of nature and how to nurture it. When the earth reverts to wilderness due to the absence of human connection, the plants and animals tend to withdraw and conceal themselves from people. In the 1970s, Louis Binford proposed that early humans got their food mainly through scavenging instead of hunting. During the Lower Paleolithic, these early humans lived in forests and woodlands, which enabled them to gather seafood, eggs, nuts, and fruits in addition to scavenging. Instead of hunting large animals for meat, they likely relied on the remains of animals that had been killed by predators or had died naturally. Research has shown that the evidence for early human hunting versus scavenging behavior varies depending on the ecological context, including the types of predators present and the surrounding environment. The endurance running hypothesis suggests that long-distance running, as seen in persistence hunting, a method still used by some modern hunter-gatherer groups, was probably a key evolutionary factor that shaped certain human traits. This idea doesn't necessarily oppose the scavenging hypothesis. Both strategies for obtaining food might have been used one after the other, alternately or even at the same time. Beginning with the shift from the Middle to Upper Paleolithic period, around 80,000 to 70,000 years ago, some groups of hunter-gatherers started to focus on hunting a narrower range of often larger game and gathering fewer types of food. This specialization also led to the creation of specific tools, like fishing nets, hooks, and bone harpoons. The move into the following Neolithic period is mainly marked by the remarkable rise of early agricultural practices. Agriculture began as early as 12,000 years ago in the Middle East and also developed independently in various other regions, including Southeast Asia, parts of Africa, Mesoamerica, and the Andes. Numerous groups have maintained their hunter-gatherer lifestyles, even though their populations have been steadily decreasing, partly due to the influence of expanding agricultural and pastoral communities. Many of these groups live in developing countries, either in dry areas or tropical forests. Regions that were once accessible to hunter-gatherers have been, and still are, invaded by agricultural settlements. As a result of this competition for land, hunter-gatherer societies either adopted farming practices or relocated to different areas. Additionally, Jared Diamond has pointed out a reduction in the availability of wild foods, especially animal resources. For instance, in North and South America, most large mammal species had become extinct by the end of the Pleistocene. Diamond attributes this to overhunting by humans, which is one of several theories proposed for the Quaternary extinction event in that region. As agricultural societies grew in number and size, they began to take over lands that were once used by hunter-gatherers. This shift towards agriculture led to the creation of the first governments in farming areas like the Fertile Crescent, ancient India, ancient China, Olmec, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Norte Chico. Because almost all humans now depend on agriculture, the few remaining hunter-gatherer cultures typically reside in places that aren't suitable for farming. Archaeologists can track the activities of hunter-gatherers, including their movements, by examining evidence like the use of stone tools. Ethnobotany is the study that documents the food plants used by different peoples and tribes around the world. Most hunter-gatherers are either nomadic or semi-nomadic, living in temporary settlements. These mobile communities usually build shelters from materials that aren't permanent, or they might use natural rock formations for shelter when available. Some hunter-gatherer societies, like the indigenous groups from the Pacific Northwest coast and the Yokuts, thrived in particularly abundant environments that allowed them to settle down or be semi-sedentary. One of the earliest examples of permanent settlements is the Osipovka culture, which existed between 14,000 and 10,300 years ago, and lived in a fish-rich area that enabled them to remain in one place throughout the year. The Chumash, for instance, had the highest known population density among hunter-gatherer societies, with about 21.6 individuals per square mile. Typically, hunter-gatherers have an egalitarian social structure, although there are exceptions among settled groups, such as those on the northwest coast of North America and the Calusa in Florida. For instance, the San people, also known as the Bushmen of southern Africa, have social practices that strongly discourage hoarding and displays of power, promoting economic equality through the sharing of food and resources. Karl Marx referred to this type of socio-economic system as primitive communism. The egalitarian nature seen in human hunters and gatherers isn't complete, but it stands out when looked at through an evolutionary lens. One of our closest primate relatives, the chimpanzee, shows a stark contrast as they create hierarchies often led by an alpha male. This difference is so pronounced that many paleoanthropologists argue that the resistance to domination played a crucial role in the development of human consciousness, language, kinship, and social structures. Most anthropologists think that hunter-gatherers lack permanent leaders. Rather, The person who takes charge at any moment depends on the specific task at hand. Within a tribe or community, hunter-gatherers are linked through both kinship and band, which refers to their living group. Typically, after marriage, young mothers tend to live near their own mothers in a matrilocal arrangement, allowing them to receive childcare support. The kinship and descent systems among human hunter-gatherers were quite adaptable, although there is some evidence suggesting that early human kinship was generally matrilineal. Hunter-gatherer societies show a lot of differences based on factors like climate zone, available technology, and social structure. Archaeologists look at the tools used by hunter-gatherers to understand these differences among various groups. According to Collard et al., temperature is the only factor that significantly affects the tools used by hunter-gatherers. They suggest that extreme temperatures create risks for these societies, leading to a greater variety of tools. This supports Torrance's idea that the risk of failure is the key factor in shaping the tools used by hunter-gatherers. One way to categorize hunter-gatherer groups is by their return systems. James Woodburn classifies them as immediate return for egalitarian societies, and delayed return for those that are not. Immediate return foragers eat their food within a day or two after gathering it, while delayed return foragers save some of their food for later. Hunting and gathering was the main way humans survived during the Paleolithic era. But looking at modern hunter-gatherers doesn't necessarily give us a clear picture of those ancient societies. Today's hunter-gatherer cultures have interacted a lot with modern civilization and don't truly represent the untouched conditions of uncontacted peoples. The shift from hunting and gathering to farming isn't just a straightforward change. Some people argue that hunting and gathering is a flexible strategy that can still be used if environmental changes lead to serious food shortages for farmers. In fact, it can be hard to clearly separate farming societies from hunter-gatherer ones, especially considering how agriculture has spread and influenced cultures over the last 10,000 years. However, some researchers in this present time talk about mixed economies or dual economies in cultural evolution, which means a mix of food gathering, like hunting and gathering, and food production, or situations where foragers trade with farmers. Some theorists who support this revisionist critique suggest that since the pure hunter-gatherer way of life vanished shortly after colonial or agricultural contact began, we can't really learn anything significant about prehistoric hunter-gatherers by studying modern ones. Lee and Gunther have dismissed most of the points made by Wilmsen. Meanwhile, Doron Schultziner and others believe that we can gain valuable insights into the lifestyles of prehistoric hunter-gatherers by examining contemporary hunter-gatherers, particularly noting their remarkable levels of equality. However, there are still several modern hunter-gatherer groups that, after interacting with other societies, maintain their traditional ways of life with minimal outside influence or with changes that help them continue hunting and gathering in the 21st century. One example is the Pila Nguru, Spinifex people from Western Australia, whose territory in the Great Victoria Desert has been found unsuitable for European farming and even for raising livestock. Another group is the Sentinelese from the Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean. They reside on North Sentinel Island and have successfully preserved their independent way of life, resisting efforts to interact with or reach out to them. Similarly, the Savannah Pume in Venezuela inhabit a region that is not suitable for large-scale economic exploitation. They sustain themselves through hunting and gathering, while also practicing a bit of manioc farming that adds to, but does not substitute, their dependence on foraged foods. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.